I would like to call to order a meeting of the Springfield Township Board of Trustees. It is April 28th, 2020, at approximately 8 o'clock a.m. The first thing is I would entertain a motion to appoint Kathleen Kennedy as Clerk Pro Tem for the purposes of this meeting. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Kathleen, would you then proceed with the roll call?
Yes, Mr. Honor. Mr. Burning,
Present.
Ms. Dukes Davis,
Present.
Mr. Honor,
Present.
and Mr. Burning Kozlowsker is absent.
And I think with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Gilbert. You have some action items this morning.
I do. Thank you, Mr. Hunterlaw. As you can tell, it is a brief agenda today. For the most part, it's a housekeeping meeting to adopt some resolutions that are necessary for business continuity. But first of all, I have an action item for a K-9 agreement with Deshaun Brooks. Officer Deshaun Brooks has just recently completed K-9 training with his dog Axel. They spent 6 weeks of training, and we look forward to having them on the street, helping protect the community and their fellow officers. So I would ask for a motion to approve the K-9 agreement with Officer Deshaun Brooks.
Do we have a motion?
So moved.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted, I know we have had K-9 officers in the past. Is this agreement in alignment with all of our other agreements?
Exactly.
Okay, very good. Second.
Mr. Burning,
Aye.
Ms. Dukes Davis,
Aye.
Mr. Honor,
Aye.
motion carries.
And actually, it's the exact same agreement that we have with another current K-9 officer, Jim Shield.
We found the K-9 program to be very beneficial. They've been instrumental in a lot of arrests. They're also a way to protect our officers. Sometimes they can do things that the officer can't do without putting themselves into more jeopardy.
Sure, and I would be remiss if I didn't thank the Haverkamp Foundation with their generous donations. They allow us to purchase these dogs and a lot of the training at no cost to the department.
The other thing, Christie, is you can ask our police, when they say, stop or I'm going to shoot, suspects sometimes keep running. When they threaten to send a dog, a lot of them will stop right in their tracks because they do not want to get bit up by a dog.
No, I'm actually 100% pro our K-9 officers. I just wanted to make sure that this agreement that we had reference the compensation of Officer Brooks was in alignment and consistent with other K-9 agreements we had with other K-9 handlers.
Absolutely. Appreciate it. Thank you. Moving on, just some discussion items. Just really briefly, wanted to bring the board up to date on where we are with the COVID-19 response here in the township. At last count, we had, I think, 25 to 30 active COVID cases in the public, not of our employees, but in the public. And unfortunately, it's a rolling number because the way it gets reported by the health department are current cases, not those that have contracted COVID and then recovered, but ones that are currently in quarantine at any particular time. So as I seen the numbers last week, we were somewhere, and I say 25 to 30 because obviously they roll off as patients recover, but that's where we're at. And
So if there could be other people that had it.
Absolutely.
They've recovered and
sure.
this is just okay.
Yeah. And as we look at those numbers, and as things start to change in the state regarding businesses to reopen, we are currently this week evaluating the township's reopening of our buildings to the public, and when that will be. It will be possibly as early as this coming Monday, and it may be a week or two after. I think I'm going to have to speak to our medical doctor that assists our fire department as well as our fire chief and the Department of Public Health to gain some information and some insight from them. But I expect that I will confer with the board later this week and make that announcement to the public before the end of this week, exactly where our buildings will be in terms of the reopening. Additionally, we're evaluating our staff that's working remotely at this point, and I say remotely only in the sense that part-time remotely. They still come in the office to do things that cannot be done outside of the office, but we are in conjunction with looking at reopening the buildings, we're looking at when do we bring employees back to the office full-time. And it's very few admin employees that this even applies to, but we are currently evaluating what that will look like and the timetable for that as well. So does the board have any questions regarding where we're at with our response? I can say that, discussing with the police chief and the fire chief, our run volume is diminishing. The police responses have diminished throughout this entire pandemic, frankly. They haven't received as many runs as they typically do. I guess mainly because people aren't on the road or they're not out doing things that they possibly shouldn't be doing. So we haven't had to respond as much as we typically would. And from the fire response standpoint, I think we pretty much held steady. We didn't really see a huge increase in runs, nor did we see a really significant decrease either. So I think we were lucky here in the township regarding the impacts that the pandemic had and continues to have. It's not over, obviously, but we are in a position, I think, to continue to adequately respond to all emergencies in the township, which is good. We never really had a huge reduction in staff in terms of being out for any significant period of time. So I think we've weathered the storm, so to speak, fairly well, and hopefully that continues going forward.
Chris, are we aware of any deaths in the township from COVID-19?
Yeah, I am aware that there have been some patients that we've treated and have taken to the hospital, and some that weren't transported to the hospital because they were DOA once, and that was primarily at a nursing home. But yes, there have been. Now, again, let me just preface this with a lot of those individuals, as I understand it, had underlying health conditions. So when we talk about deaths as a result of COVID-19, I think unfortunately it's hard to discern whether or not those individuals died of COVID-19 or with COVID-19. I think that's an important distinction that unfortunately the media doesn't always talk about.
Not just the media, they're not disseminating the difference in any numbers. If anybody who has COVID-19 dies, even if they die of cancer or a heart attack, it's attributed to COVID-19.
Sure.
Sure.
So most of the individuals were, at least what I'm hearing from our fire department EMS providers, is most of the individuals that we're coming into contact with that have been confirmed to have COVID-19 or have suffered and ultimately died with it, is that they had some fairly significant underlying health conditions that contributed to their death. But I'm not the doctor, so I can't say for certain, but I do know that to be true. So as tied to, obviously, this pandemic and the effects that it's had on the closing of a lot of businesses, we are looking at our budget projections. We are the finance director and myself, Kim Cox, we are looking and making very conservative projections. We're looking at our 3 to 5 year revenue trends, and we're, at least for the remainder of this year and possibly next year, looking at a 10% reduction in property tax revenue. Again, just to be conservative and try and plan for that. Do I think that will happen? I hope not, and I don't think it will be that severe. And since we are majority property tax revenue deriving organization, I think that speaks good for the way our budget will look going into the future. This is one time where I say being a bedroom community actually helps us financially, whereas in any other situation it doesn't. But we are predicting a 10% reduction just to be on the safe side. From an income tax revenue standpoint, obviously the board is aware that we have the joint economic development zone, and it's a little easier to predict for us somewhat because unlike a typical city or village, we're not collecting income tax from our residents. So we can tell what businesses are closed in our community and what aren't, so we can try and get a better idea of what kind of impact that's going to have on our income tax revenue through the JEDS area. And we are predicting right now about a 20 to 25% reduction. Why so high or so little, depending on your perspective, is looking at the major employers in the township. They're either public and or they're considered essential businesses, and they've been working throughout the pandemic. So we're hoping that the impact to our revenue is not as significant as you may see at the state or county level, where they depend heavily on sales tax, obviously. So we don't depend as heavily on income taxes as they would. But so we're looking at a 20-25% reduction in our JEDS revenue. Just again, to be on the conservative side and to provide some projection numbers to guide us through this. Additionally, the things that the board has done at the beginning of this and put a pause on all sort of non-emergency spending. And as I plug in those numbers and those reductions and expenditures, reduction in expenditures, we look pretty good through the end of this year and through 2021. As the board is aware, though, even prior to the COVID pandemic, we were expecting to run a police and fire levy at the end of 2020, possibly in November. Whether we do that or not, I think is still to be determined, and we have until August to make that decision. But obviously this doesn't help, and it only exacerbates an already tight budget situation in police and fire, because it's our philosophy to extend those levies and drain as much revenue as we can out of those until we actually have to come back to the residents for additional property tax. Both of those departments have went over 10 years without an increase in revenue. So it's just bad timing for us that this happened right at the end of those levies. And if we have to extend them even further than we had planned on, meaning into 21 or 22, it's really making a tight situation even worse, and really is making me nervous in terms of our ability to provide the same level of continued service from those two departments to the public. So again, I'll have a better idea of what the revenue projections look like for this year, probably sometime in late July, August, as we get through the second quarter and those numbers come out, right about the time when we'll have to make a decision on whether we're going to go ahead and put the levy on the ballot this November. So we'll have time to do that. But just know that we are looking at it, we're watching those numbers, and we'll be able to make a better prediction and some projections here mid to late summer.
Sounds good.
With that concludes my report. And And I just want to add that the first resolution that you'll see, just you may be wondering why there's a supplemental appropriation within the fire district fund. That is to provide for the employer portion of OPERS that we have to pay. And typically we don't pay any OPERS out of the fire district fund. We had to create a new line because we've created medic-only positions, meaning these individuals that we've hired are only going to be medics and not firefighters. And as a result, they are actually in OPERS by Ohio Revised Code rather than police and fire pension fund or Social Security. So because we've created this new position, they are OPERS eligible and required to be an OPERS. So we had to create a new line and actually put money in there for the employer portion that's required to be supplemented to OPERS.
Gotcha. All right, with that, we have three resolutions today. The first one is resolution number 40, 2020, which is a supplemental appropriation within the fire district fund. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Burning.
Aye.
Ms. Dukes Davis.
Aye.
Mr. Honeywell.
Aye.
Resolution passes.
Next, we have resolution number 41, 2020, declaring motor vehicles located on public or private property in Springfield Township, Hamilton County, Ohio, to be junk motor vehicles pursuant to Revised Code 505.173, and ordering the removal of such vehicles pursuant to Resolution number 80, 2012, and Revised Code 505.871. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Burning.
Aye.
Ms. Dukes Davis.
Aye.
Mr. Honeywell.
Aye.
Resolution carries.
Next, we have resolution number 42, 2020, declaring nuisances pursuant to Ohio Revised Code Section 505.87 at various listed properties within Springfield Township and authorizing statutory actions necessary to abate the nuisances. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Burning?
Aye.
Ms. Dukes Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Honeylo?
Aye.
Resolution passes.
And I can see from the motion there is no shortage of high grass.
Perfect weather for it.
Yes. Is there any
It's
other?
going to get worse because it's supposed to rain the next 3 days.
Right. Is there any other business before the board?
None?
Do we have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Burning?
Aye.
Ms. Dukes Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Honeylo?
Aye. The meeting's adjourned. Thank you, everyone, and for anyone who's watching us on TV.